Hello and welcome back to Dish Creates. I'm at my desk today offering a proposition. I got a Kindle last year. It just changed my life. It made reading so much more fun, so much more accessible, and I just started gobbling up books. It was really, really cool rediscovering reading, getting back to that joy that I used to have when I was younger. A few of the books that really sparked my love for reading again were I read the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. I read The Priory of the Orange Tree. I read Anne of Green Gables, a philosophy book called The Practicing Stoic. A friend of a friend, basically, recommended the book Fourth Wing. And I was like, okay. I looked it up. Fantasy, dragons, love story. Great. Love that. And I hadn't really read any like TikTok heater books yet. I started it and I had total faith that it was going to be good. I started it, and within a few pages, I just knew or believed that I knew it just wasn't for me. Made a TikTok about this. The main thing that turned me off to it, the phrase was double standard for the win. And in my mind at that moment, 1,000 ancient, nearly forgotten Tumblr memes of like 2010, 2014 popped into my mind. I just don't think I'm gonna like this book. So I returned the book. I was just so shocked. Like, it was so far from what I was expecting. That video got pushed in the algorithm to people who also did not like Fourth Wing or thought it was overrated. And most of the comments were like, yes, I do not understand the hype. It gets worse. Like, those types of phrases keep appearing and it breaks immersion for me every single time. And then probably like 3 or 4 months later, the video started getting pushed to people who absolutely love Fourth Wing. Said that it was worth it, said that you have to push through the initial like cringe of it. You stop noticing it after a while. I had already put it on my Goodreads that I was gonna start it. And then I just rated it 1 star. Upon further inspection, I don't think that was fair. I think you can probably determine if you're gonna like a book within the first chapter or 2. If the writing style just doesn't appeal to you, like you can usually tell. But does that make me qualified to rate the book? I don't think so. So here's my plan. I am going to re-download Fourth Wing, and I'm going to read the whole thing to see if I do or do not end up liking the book. And to be extra fair, I made myself a rubric. Number 1 is world building. Can I get immersed in the universe of Fourth Wing? If you can feel the richness beyond just what's on the page, if I believe that the author has mastery over this magic system, over this culture, the social and political components of the book, I'm happy. That doesn't mean it even has to necessarily be complicated. A book can be approachable and still have good world building, right? The next one is plots. It's pretty self-explanatory. The biggest thing here, and something that I think sometimes falls flat in romantasy, does the plot feature a bunch of gimmicky, easy, conveniently timed plot points just to make the romance more spicy? The romance and plot, because romantasy, those two things are, they obviously go together, does it rely too heavily on angst? Does it rely too heavily on physical attraction, on smut? Line level writing. I feel like I know where this one is going, but I'm gonna just hold my tongue and try to go into this as neutral as possible. And last but not least, character depth and development. Can I buy into the hero's journey, right? Each one is worth 5 points. I will grade the book out of 60. So if you are a Fourth Wing lover, you are welcome to watch this video. I hope that this will be interesting for you. If you're a Fourth Wing hater, you will probably enjoy this as well. My goal is to be as unbiased and truthful as possible. You should know that I did just finish reading the second book in the Stormlight Archive from Brandon Sanderson, Words of Radiance. And those 2 books are some of the most epic, fantastic, inspiring fantasy stories I've ever read. So I would say even since the first time I tried to read Fourth Wing, my standards have gone up. But I'm not opposed to a fun, lighthearted, easily digestible book. It just has to be good. So let me go acquire a copy of Fourth Wing, and we'll get on the couch and we'll start reading. This is what I'm talking about. One comment is terrible book. The second comment is love this book. I feel like I need to decide for myself, There it is. Fourth Wing. There it is. Double standard. FTW. Okay, main female MC is chronically ill, I'm not dying, I'm not hating it. All right, I'm 10% in. I just finished chapter 3. So far, I think the plot is interesting. I think the concept is interesting. It's like, it's fun. It's a dragon riding, like, warrior school. I was like engaged while I was reading. The writing was still pretty tough. I'm not gonna lie to you right now, pretty tough. A lot of really long, kind of awkwardly worded sentences. Like this one, the only relic I've ever heard of are when a dragon uses magic to mark the skin of their bonded rider. There's just like so many better ways to word that. You could even say, I've only heard of relics that form when dragons use magic to mark the skin of their bonded rider. It's the words of, are, when, like all those 3 words next to each other. That's like how we speak in normal life. I think the fact that it's made it through to a book is kind of, you know, 2 chapters in, everyone's already so horny. And when she meets Xaden, I can't get through these little sentences without cringing. The top corner of his cheeks only makes him hotter, flaming hot, scorching hot. Gets you in trouble and you like it levels of hot. Suddenly I can't remember exactly why Mira told me not to F around with outside of my age group. And then there's kind of confusing concepts. At the end of chapter 2, Violet says she's not able to decrypt like Xaden's stare. But then at the very beginning of chapter 3, which is the same moment, the line is, the hatred in Xaden's stare burns the side of my face like a palpable flame. Which is it? There's an effing smirk on Xaden's arrogant, handsome face. I'm really trying, guys. I'm really trying. I have adjusted my expectations. I'm expecting them to use kind of modern language. It's fine, I can handle it. But as of right now, I feel like the plot is very predictable. I'm hoping it's better than I expect it to be. 10%? I guess maybe I'll just check in with you at 20%. Okay, we're back. Day 2. I'm gonna try to read 10% a day. I think that's doable. If I'm doing it for a video, I can justify spending more time on it. I'm going into this interested in what happens next. So I think that's a good sign. No. I'm trying so hard not to be a hater. They're sparring. Heat rushes up my neck and flames lick my cheeks as he lowers his face so his lips are only inches away from mine. I can make out every speck of gold in his onyx eyes, every bump and ridge of his scar. Beautiful effing a-hole. My breath catches and my body warms. The traitorous biatch. You are not attracted to toxic men, I remind myself. And yet here I am, getting all attracted. Toxic men. Toxic men? Isn't her biggest concern that there's like a blood feud? Calling him a toxic man almost just feels like a reduction of the intensity of their situation. Toxic men? Really? All right, I am 40% through Fourth Wing. These are my rubric notes. Let's start with... Sometimes they take a nap and they're nice up there, and other times they beat each other to death. So I guess you'll get to see what happens as I talk. Let's start with the bad, and then we'll go to the good. I think the 2 lowest categories for me right now are line level writing and romance. My biggest issue, and when I say issue, I mean I'm mostly looking to identify things that disrupt the flow of my like immersion in the story. I think I've gotten over the use of modern language. Like that's obviously, she intended to write it that way. I don't think it's objectively bad, even if I don't prefer it. The only times that the modern language really bothers me is when I can clearly identify a reference that's being made. Like if I can identify what meme a phrase was pulled from, that ruins my immersion completely. So there's been unfortunately a fair amount of lines where I'm just like, I wish they had run that through like a couple more rounds of editing. Let me find an example. He's obviously on my side here, which confuses the hell out of me, since more than anything, I'm certain he wants me dead. I think it would be even stronger to break it up into 2 sentences. He's on my side here, and that confuses the hell out of me. More than anything, I'm certain he wants me dead. I think the which and the since, I think it just like, it makes the sentence feel like a flat tire. The post knocks a chunk of wood of granite loose, and the rock tumbles down the course, smacking every obstacle in its path until it crashes 20 feet in front of us. If there was ever a metaphor for my life, well, that's it. So for me at least, when I read the line that right before they did like the pre-gauntlet training, when they were all watching the granite, I was like, oh, that's horrifying, because you immediately imagine yourself in those shoes. So when the line after is just like spelling out the metaphor, I'm like, let the reader get there, you know? I think everyone with even the most minute level of critical thinking is going to be able to see, like, from the perspective of Violet, watching the granite fall and get crushed on the obstacles, like, that is exactly what she thinks is going to happen to her. That's a great concept. I read it and I was like, oh yeah, that's a great way of setting up this fear. And then it just like spells it out. Give your reader some credit. Here's another one. The truth of the words tighten around my chest like a vise, cutting off my air instead of holding me together, leaving me weak and breathless. That last phrase, it's just not needed. Leaving me weak and breathless, like that was implied. We didn't need to hear that spelled out. One more gripe that I have with the writing is this repeated phrase, and it goes emotion, personification of that emotion, body part. Fear swells in my chest. The anger wells in his eyes, or much more like fantastical versions of that. If you search I can't help but notice in the Kindle like search bar, it would probably come up 100 times. There were times that it was even twice on the same sentence. We get it. You're noticing stuff. There are better ways to draw a reader's attention to something that's important without spelling it out, without spelling out characters' emotions and responses to it. There are more sophisticated ways to do that. More creative ways. So that's the worst of it, okay? That's my harshest criticism so far. Romance. I don't hate it. I think I get it. I feel, and I'm interested in Xaden as a character. I think I'm interested in how him and Violet are gonna, work out together. I liked the fallout with Dane. I thought when she realized that he wasn't gonna save her in like a worst case scenario, if he was gonna follow the rules, and that kind of crushed the romance between them. I thought that was really good. What I didn't like, or I'm not liking so far, or I would say I'm doubting, is just I'm getting sick of the constant reiteration of how hot Xaden is. We get it! There was one so bad that I wrote it down on my page. I used a portion of my tiny romance category to mark it. She always describes Xaden's hot body and her reaction to his body with her body. It's when they're about to fight for the first time in the sparring grounds, and she goes, I fling a dagger straight at his ridiculously well-sculpted chest. I'm sorry, isn't she supposed to be scared for her life right now? Doesn't she think he wants to kill her? My main problem is not the description that he's hot. Fine, whatever, it's a romantasy book. Sure, let's make sure that the reader knows he's attractive and that the main character is attracted to him, sure. But to have that be noted in a moment where she's afraid she's about to die, it's immersion breaking. I don't even think if you were sparring with the hottest person on this entire planet, my husband, that you would have a reaction like that. Like, that's not what you're thinking about if you're worried that you're going to die, right? So I found that just kind of excessively horny, and the repeated notes every time Xaden enters the room, she's talking about how hot he is and how attracted she is to him. So I'm hoping that there is some kind of supernatural connection between Violet and Xaden, like maybe something to do with their dragons, because the dragons are bonded. Otherwise, the attraction just feels excessively horny. All that being said, they're two characters. I like what's happening between them, and I'm hopeful. Character development, I feel like there hasn't been really a lot yet. I just got past the threshing. I feel like I know what each primary character's main issue is. I think, if I'm understanding correctly, I think Violet's personal hurdle to get over is like hopelessness and pessimism, because she seems to just be surviving day to day as opposed to like really trying to achieve. I think like Xaden pointed that out, thinking outside of the box, fighting to win and like achieve instead of just staying alive. I think that's what they're setting up. I think that's what the author is setting up for her. I would say it feels somewhat weak because she always kind of had a fighting spirit. So that's like kind of remains to be seen. And then Xaden, we know from this point that he believes he's a bad person or like a doomed person. And the fact that he hasn't killed Violet allows him to believe that he's maybe has a shred of goodness in him. So that's interesting. He's still very shrouded in mystery, so we'll have to see how that unfolds. World building. Okay, so the world building I think has been simple, and I think that's fine. The lore and stuff is just on a need-to-know basis. The bonds between dragons and other dragons, the bonds between dragons and humans. I did notice that the first mention of gods wasn't until page 166. That was the first time a character mentioned a god specifically. And it was when Violet was about to do, what was it? The pre-gauntlet activity, Be With Me, Zinal. I haven't spent enough time at Temple for the God of Luck to care much about what happens to me right now, but it's worth a shot. So that was the first time we learned that there's like gods of concepts. So again, I think it's fine. I don't mind that there's not a ton of world building stuff, as long as the plot is interesting, which now we'll get to the good part, okay? The really good part. I am loving the plot and the story so far. The concept is really good. Like, it's fun. It's a fun idea. Dragon riding, like, intense environment, and there's bonds between dragons and this fight for Violet to be accepted or to be revered even amidst her peers. And her conflict with her mother, I think that's really compelling. The gauntlet was really cool. This was my favorite part so far, was her figuring out the creative solution, using the rope to climb and using the knife. That was like, she used her scholarship abilities to determine that would have been okay, because it was part of her body, right? On a technicality. And I think that speaks to... I think that's a really good way to integrate her chronic illness into the plot. The threshing was also really interesting. I wasn't sure what to expect. I think I went into it expecting I had low expectations. I was like, okay, I didn't think much about the black dragon, which I already forgot his name. Tairn, I think. But the Feathertail, I was like, okay, maybe she'll bond with the Feathertail and that'll be perfect because she can climb up the side, and it turns out he's going to become a riding dragon. So the bonding with both, I thought that was really rewarding to the reader. It was rewarding, it was fun, and I felt like proud of her, The only thing I struggle with the plot is that it just feels like the dilemmas. It'll set it up, I'll be like, okay, I understand. Like, I know what the conflict is in this situation, and then it will spell it out. And I'm like, okay, I really didn't need you to spell it out. When she bonded with the two dragons and that, like, was final, right? She and Xaden are in the same room in like the dining hall or something. There's like tensity between them, right? Because of the fact that their dragons are bonded and now they're tied together. And that was all, I think, really, really spelled out. I didn't need anyone to tell me that the tension between them just became like, it just got turned, the dial got turned way up. I knew that. And the last line of this whole like interaction, or they're like looking at each other, ogling and trying to pretend like she's not ogling, was Xaden Riorson, I still don't know how to pronounce his last name, is now in the business of keeping his mortal enemy alive. Okay, so that's a relatively compelling line, but I feel like we've established by this point that they're not mortal enemies. Like, he protected her during the threshing. They've had interesting conversations. He has already said that he wants to keep her alive. They seem to have like some sort of tense but like rapport with each other. So at this point in the story, for her to think that she is his mortal enemy, it just doesn't really ring true. So all that being said, I am definitely having a better time with it than I was when I started it. The biggest thing, and what bums me out the most, is like, I want to like it. I really, really do. I want to like the plot. I want to enjoy the reading. But the poor syntax, the clunky sentences, the repeated lines, it's very distracting for me. I may just not be the demographic for it. So I'm hoping that it continues to improve. And as much as I can, I will try to just get past this taste stuff. Oh, another note of kudos. I'm glad that we're 40% in and there hasn't been any smut yet. So I was told that this book was extremely smutty, and it's part of the reason I didn't read it for a long time. So the fact that we're still just in like the tension phase, I'm pleased. All that being said, I know that was a lot of criticism, but I am still like enjoying it, I would say. I would just say I'm enjoying it on a surface level. And I'm interested to see what happens with the greater plot, like the world plot. And I'm hoping that her romance with Xaden is interesting too. So there's my update. That was way longer than I thought it was going to be. I'm gonna have to cut a lot out. 20 minutes? The whole video is supposed to be 20 minutes. I'll see you. Maybe I'll wait to make my next update till I'm like 80% through. All right, I'm 80% through. I did make it from, where did I stop? Like 40% to 80% really fast. So I'm definitely enjoying it. So I feel like the author tried to hold on or keep promoting this like, will they, won't they, are they, aren't they, enemies or lovers vibe longer than it was really believable. I also really struggle with the way that the book like it'll repeat itself and it'll be kind of redundant. Like she'll say something like, Ashi, what is it? We can't let someone so weak, so incapable of fighting live. It's against our beliefs. Jack shouts, and they're talking about the Feathertail. And the next line is, I know he's not just talking about the dragon. Duh. All that being said though, it's tough. I'm still enjoying it. Like I'm still having fun, and I'm having more fun now that I'm not fixating on modern language, because I think that is a style thing more than it is like a right and wrong or correct and incorrect thing. The syntax though, still struggling. Well, I'm gonna try to finish it today if I can. All right, we're in the home stretch. They're fighting the wyverns. They're fighting the wyverns. They're protecting the innocents. A point of no return has been crossed. I'm excited to see how this ends. Okay, I think what I'm gonna do right now, while I'm just fresh after reading the book, I'm gonna go through each category, write down any notes that I can think of, and I'll do like an off-the-cuff instinct rating on each of the categories. I'll sleep on it, and then I'll more thoroughly think about it. Peba, the door needs to be shut, sweetie. She doesn't speak English. And like settle on a rating. By the way, I decided to reduce the page turner value out of 5 to out of 2. I think page turner value is kind of like a summation of everything. So I don't think it should be weighted as heavily as the others. So I'm gonna do that and then probably go to bed. Okay, I've done my rating and I've translated it into stars, and I think it's accurate, but I think it'll be worth giving it a night's sleep. We'll go through each category. I'll give you like, I mean, I've already talked a lot, but I'll give a summary of my opinion on each of the categories, and then I will deliver my verdict. And also decide if I'm gonna read the next one. All right, it is the next day. I have slept. I have expanded my notes, and I've reviewed my rating to see if I needed to adjust or change anything after reflection. So before I jump into the categories, I just want to say this is a very hard review. I went into Fourth Wing assuming, I would say, the absolute worst. I did not believe that I was going to like it at all. And while I have already had many, many criticisms, I cannot sit here and say that I hated it. And I think I can paint a picture of my internal conflict and how I feel about Fourth Wing as I go through these categories. I don't find myself clearly in the I loved it or the I hated it camp. Not quite in the middle, but yeah, we'll get into it. So let's start with the world building. This is the category that I wrote the least about, because truthfully, there wasn't much of it. The information that was revealed about the Navarre kingdom, about the connection with dragons, about the existence of magic and wyverns, in my opinion, was on a very need-to-know basis. Now, need to know is obviously subjective. I think that, I wrote here, it gave us enough world-building information to understand, but not enough for me to feel invested. I think the goal of the book was to be very approachable, which is not a bad thing. I have read books that I very much struggled to get through the first 100 pages because it's just a lot of information. So this almost felt like the opposite extreme. I think the desire to be very approachable and a very easy read was really shown in the world building. For example, when, spoiler, we discover near the end of the book that Venin are real, there's a line right after that admission that says, "You're saying people who can somehow tap into the power of magic without a dragon or a griffin to channel, corrupting their power beyond salvation, actually exist." I say the words slowly, just so we're crystal clear. They're not just part of the creation fable. I feel like that line was only there for people who weren't really paying attention, because by this point in the story, we should know what Venin are. They've been mentioned many, many times. They've been explained many times as part of folklore. So for people who were kind of skimming through the lore portions to get to just the main romantic conflict, it seems like that's what that was there for. So to be fair, this is the first book out of, I think, 3 so far. And I have heard that the most recent book has a lot more world building. So that's good. I could see this just kind of being the book that's supposed to grip the reader and make them interested in the universe so that that can be explored later. So I think there's allowances to be made for low-level world building or approachable world building. So I rate the world building in this book 3 out of 5. Okay, plot and story. I teetered a lot on my rating for this one because there were a lot of moments that I really liked. I'd say the middle section of the book was by far my favorite. I think it had the strongest tension and conflict. I already said I loved the Gauntlet arc. I loved the threshing. Great twist there. I think the plot and story are the things that kept me the most engrossed in the book. However, I was extremely disappointed by the way that the end fleshed out. Specifically, the Xaden chapter. Getting a first-person Xaden POV it threw me off so bad. And I think first-person, multiple points of view is really hard to do without feeling corny, without feeling like the author is pulling back the curtain, especially when so much of the story conflict has been, or was supposed to be, does Xaden actually love Violet? Or is it just to keep her alive for his sake, for his dragon's sake, and for Taryn's sake? With that being such a huge conflict point, throwing in a Xaden POV while Violet is unconscious feels like the easy way to answer that question. I felt really uncomfortable, and this may just be a style thing, so I'll put this in with an asterisk next to it. I did not really feel like the way that the author wrote Xaden, or his perspective, it didn't really feel believable to me. I couldn't really distinguish too much between Xaden's POV and the way that he thought and the narration style of his perspective compared to Violet. How do I say this? The chapter didn't really feel like Xaden's voice to me. It just felt like what Violet would want Xaden's voice to be, which brings me to character development and brings me to the romance. These, I think, are kind of tied together. So for plot and story, I give this a 3.5. I don't think I can go higher than that, specifically because the romance is part of the plot, so I'm going to get to that part now. Okay, so my first note that I have here is, why is everyone so horny? Everyone wants to get freaky. Violet non-stop talks about how hot, sexy, delicious, yummy Xaden is. And I kept reading that and I was like, okay, I really, really hope that there's some supernatural connection between Violet and Xaden beyond just the dragons. Otherwise, it's just lust. So I was really hoping to get an answer to that in the end. Like, there's some sort of cosmic, if dragons are fated to be mates, then humans are fated to be mates. Like, it felt like a grab at the mate trope that we see in like ACOTAR, where there's this tension between Rysand and, what the heck is her name? I forgot already. Feyre. It includes things like extreme, like lustful attraction and romance and understanding, and also like speaking into each other's thoughts. And I couldn't figure out why it felt so familiar until I read the line, his words wrapped around my mind. And I was like, that phrase was repeated over and over and over in A Court of Mist and Fury. Now, I don't think, like, I can understand the fated mates trope, that's common. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's plagiarism, but it felt like it was trying to accomplish the intensity of that without actually explaining it with the plot. So that was a huge disappointment for me, that there was no explanation for such an intense attraction. And when I keep sounding to say Rasan. So when Xaden tells Violet that he has loved her and been in love with her from the moment that he saw her, I think that really falls flat unless there's an explanation for why. Is it really just physical? Like, is it, are we just supposed to believe that there's like this mystical, it's like it wants to have a mystical, magical connection, but it doesn't supply one. I can buy into them falling in love with each other because of their dragons, but then that also feels weird because it's not really them, like it's their dragons. So maybe that's going to be amended in the second book. I would hope so, because yeah, the intense, like, sensual attraction between them, I wrote, is there a supernatural connection between V and Z? Otherwise, her attraction just feels excessively horny, and we find out later from Xaden's POV that it was the same for him, which is also really weird, because aren't they supposed to be enemies? Shouldn't he abhor her and abhor her family? Like, shouldn't that relationship be tainted by default? So I think, I said this already, so I'll keep it short. I think the book tries to sell this, like, enemies lust only relationship after many romantic moments and gestures. Like when he kisses her at the turret and says, like, leave for me, that is romantic. That's romantic, and it's survival. So that, plus him leaving Violet's and acting gentlemanly with her and expressing, like, love behaviors, it just doesn't jive with this, like, oh, Violet thinking he just wants to keep me alive because otherwise he'll die and his dragon will die, or otherwise and I'm also like, she's kind of hot, or I'm attracted to her because our dragons are mated and stuff like that. Like, I think it tries to maintain that, like, he just wants to keep me alive for himself too long, and doesn't really supplicate that in the story. So in my opinion, it makes Violet look stupid. How does she not realize that he's in love with her? It's very obvious. And it's because it's not a third person point of view, because it's Violet's point of view the whole time. It's like, if we can see it, then she should be able to see it, because we are looking through her eyes. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, even in the second to last chapter, he hears her say when she's paralyzed, I'll take care of you, just live, please live. And her thought, of course, he wants me to live. I'm integral to his survival. Please, like, the main character looks stupid to everyone else. It should be written on the back of her eyelids that Xaden is in love with her. So the enemies to lovers tension kind of goes bye-bye. The most interesting thing about the two of them is their position. Xaden's position obviously gets a lot more complicated, or we learn that it's much more complicated when we find out that he's secretly still part of the rebellion, and he's protecting this rebuilt city, which again reminded me again of Rasan and Valaris, and the fact that she is from a staunch, like, nationalist family who her mother participated in withholding information, vital information, for loyalty. That social standing is so significant. It was strange to see the book rely so heavily on their sexual tension and not enough on how much work it would take to kind of remove the indoctrination from Violet's mother, or from the rewritten history. Like, Violet already knows. Like, Violet learns that the history has been rewritten, and Xaden becomes a much more complicated character by the end, at least from our point of view. He was already always complicated, we just didn't know. So it's strange, because I really, really want to like it, and I want to like them. It's like, I would say the whole book, I think the concepts are really good, and I think the bones are really good, but it just kind of gets lost in the fleshing out of it all. The enemies notion really dissipates after, I would say, the first 10 chapters. And I stopped believing that Xaden ever wanted to kill her after they talk for the first time. So for romance, the highest I could give was 2 out of 5. Character development. I don't have a lot to say here. By the end of chapter 10, we kind of understood what Violet and Xaden's flaw setup was, at least enough to carry the story forward. So Violet, she's pessimistic and kind of hopeless, supposedly. That's what Xaden sees in Violet. But from my perspective, and I would be very curious to hear other points of view on this, what I saw was that Violet goes from being weak, yet determined, to being strong and determined, which isn't a lot, like that isn't a huge change. The other, I would say, underdeveloped but more compelling arc for her is her being more open to breaking rules, breaking the norm, and stepping away from this structured society. It's stated at the end, it's like literally spelled out right before she like uses her powers to try to win the fight with the wyverns. I've spent the last year trying to prove to myself that I'm nothing like my mother. I'm not cold, I'm not callous. Maybe there's a part of me that's more like her than I care to admit. I have to be honest, I didn't really see that. But her personality never, I don't think ever evoked an image of her mother. There was always like, my mother doesn't respect me, doesn't want me to be, won't accept me unless I'm what she wants. I don't ever sense that there's like a tension between Violet, basically Violet and herself, of wanting to not be like her mother. So that was like, I felt like that was the first time I was hearing that. She chooses to be like violent in this moment and implies that that's her being like her mom. Xaden, the only arc that I could really define for him was that he allowed himself to fall in love with Violet. And I would love to say that sharing his secrets with her was part of that arc, but that happened to him. He wasn't planning to reveal it at the time that they did, at the time that she learns his position, right? So it's just like so much happens to Xaden, things happen to Violet, and it ultimately left me to feel, okay, this might be the harshest thing I say, and I may not even leave it in. Violet just feels too much like a self-insert, and Xaden felt like a teenage angsty version of Rysand with less agency and less complexity to him. Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna leave that in because it's rough. Never did I think I'd be sitting here praising ACOTAR because I don't think I rated any of those books over 3 stars. Yeah, I actually have to reduce this. I'm gonna give character development a 1 out of 5. And I'm gonna hope that it improves in later books. I think there's more said about Violet's arc than is actually shown. Okay, line level writing. I'm gonna try to keep this short. I don't know how some of these lines got published. I found just like straight up grammatical errors. I think the syntax was the biggest problem. Lacked refinements. It read like teenage fiction, but is themed like an 18+ novel. Lacking flow. A lot of repetition. Oh, it's in first person present tense. Oh gosh, yeah. First person present tense is kind of crazy to do multiple POVs or to throw in a POV at the end. I'm getting harsher. I really didn't want to be harsh because I'm at this moment, I'm still deciding if I want to read the second book. I probably won't read it right away. I'm curious. I'm curious if it does in fact get better. Like I said, I think the bones are good. So I'm willing to kind of stick it out and see if it improves. If you search like a vise, you'll see that at least 10 times. Actually, I'm going to look up the word. Wrapped around my heart like a vise. It appears, exactly 10 times the word vise appears. And it's always exactly the same. Squeezes my heart like a vise around my chest, grips my chest like a vise. Yeah, a lot of times things were stated and then explained, like something was said out loud by a character and then explained by the narrator. It's just not needed. I think the line level writing falls below a college level. So I'm gonna also give this a 1 out of 5. Page turner value. I'll keep this short. Aside from the hiccups in the reading experience, due to grammar and syntax, again, I think the fact that the bones of the book are interesting kept me turning the pages. I finished it, I think, in a little bit over a week. To be fair, though, I did tell myself to read 10% a day so that I could, get this video out as soon as possible. Plot twist was interesting. And that alone makes me consider reading the second book, so I give the page turner a 1 out of 2. So let me run some calculations and we'll see where I land. So it's out of 27. Oh, that's so funny. I changed around some of the ratings. I increased the plot and story 0.5 points. I increased world building 0.5 points and I took away 1 point from character development as I was talking, but it still netted out to be exactly the same as I rated it last night, which is 11.5 out of 27, which comes out to 42%, aka 2.2 stars out of 5. If you are a diehard Fourth Wing lover, please don't let me quash that enjoyment. Reading is not a competition. It is supposed to be fun and enjoyable. I've read difficult books, I've read easy books. This is not comparing. I'm grading this as if I was a book critic, and 2.2, I think, is a proper assessment, at least from my perspective. This is why I say this review is hard, because giving it a 2.2 makes me kind of sad. I wanted to like it, and I want, like, the story, like I said, my highest rating is 3.5, and it's for plot and story, and the world building is 3. Like, it was enough to really intrigue me, but still leave me feeling disappointed at the end. So I think I'm gonna give it some time. I'm gonna read some other books. I may end up reading Iron Flame, giving it a try, seeing if I actually do end up liking it. Because you never know. Or it was released in 2023. Oh yeah, Court of Thorns and Roses was released in 2015. Listen, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap in fantasy romance books. And every book that borrowed something from another book, that book borrowed it from something else, and so forth. And it goes back further and further and further. Probably all leads back to Lord of the Rings, The King of the Golden River. The New York Public Library posted an article called 12 pre-Tolkien fantasy novels to try. It goes to show how much of a cornerstone Tolkien was. So that is my official, and listen, I thought it through, okay? I tried to be as fair and honest as possible. This is my official review of Fourth Wing. I guess the question now is, was my initial assessment right? That I wasn't gonna like it? I guess technically, yes. You spend enough time focusing on something, you find a love for it. So I feel like that's what happened. I feel a love toward the Fourth Wing characters and toward the universe and toward the dragons especially, but felt that love leaving me a little bit hollow. So I guess my initial assessment was correct, that I wouldn't like it. But now I can say, that with confidence and not just in a, this book sucks and I'm not gonna read it kind of way. All right. If there is another popular TikTok book that you want me to read, that you think is overrated, that you think is underrated, let me know in the comments. This channel is kind of my creative space. So I do book stuff, I do gardening stuff, I do nail and yap videos. So subscribe if you'd like to see more of that. I'd really appreciate it. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed. And I'll see you on the next one, my ladies. Bye.